Deadly Beauties is yet another entry in the 2014 Indie Game Maker contest, and is by far the worst submission that I've looked at so far. It's hard for me to think of any category in which this game isn't flawed, to be honest, and that one area where I feel the game does alright for itself is the least important aspect of any game in my opinion. But I guess I should move on to explaining why this game blows chunks and is in need of a serious overhaul. Story-wise, the game is somewhat creative by starring a cast of young female characters that possess the ability to fatally poison anyone they come in contact with, but have sworn an oath as part of their training to only use their lethal toxins on people that are extremely violent or highly immoral. If they use their toxins on someone that doesn't meet those criteria or some of the other rules specified by their school, then they will then be destemmed and banished from the kingdom in disgrace. The part where the story starts to fall apart is when you realize how much of an importance the game places on using your toxins wisely, despite never presenting you with any cases where the line between good and evil is gray. Instead, you're constantly thrust into situations where you are dealing with greedy poachers that have no respect for life, or dealing with drug-dealing criminals in the city which have no respect for life. It especially doesn't help that the game has text that implies choosing your targets carefully is important, despite the fact that most enemies are programmed to either run away or die instantly as part of a scripted event. In terms of gameplay, Deadly Beauties is a turn-based RPG with mostly set encounters, with the only random encounters taking place in the city's sewers, although the combat doesn't escape my laundry list of complaints. In fact, I have multiple complaints about the game in terms of its combat specifically. 1. The battles in this game tend to range from jaw-droppingly easy to about right on the difficulty scale, but so many of the battles are underwhelming that it's hard to overlook how flawed most of the set encounters appear to be. 2. The spells in this game tend to cost too little mana in comparison to the amount of MP available for the characters. This is made even more redundant when you consider how powerful the melee attacks are for most of the girls anyway. 3. The magic spells also hit their targets even if the character casting the spell is blind. This makes little logical sense in my opinion, since the entire purpose of blind is to decrease the target's hit rate. If all magical attacks are a guaranteed hit, then it completely negates the point of this effect, especially if the magical attacks in question can do a decent amount of damage to the target. 4. Some of the spells contain effects that are mislabeled or require 0 MP in order to cast. Though to further my problems with this area, the game will sometimes indicate that a character has learned a new ability, but it won't pop up in the specials menu. Outside of all those flaws with the combat, the game is also prone to crashing, so much so that I've been unable to finish the game, and eventually gave up after half a dozen attempts. In terms of visuals, the game is a mess for multiple reasons. The most noticeable of these issues is that the artwork in the game isn't consistent. The enemies come from at least 3 different sources, while the character art comes across as something done rather quickly in MS Paint or some other program. While I do give them credit for using some original artwork, it doesn't change the fact that their game isn't consistent in the visuals, and that some of them definitely clash against one another in terms of style. Another issue with the game is that a lot of the areas feel cluttered with impassable objects that shouldn't be there in my opinion. It's even worse when you consider the fact that characters can sometimes be found in areas that are inaccessible to the player, for no apparent reason. Though it goes beyond that with many areas in the game being poorly defined. A lot of objects that for all intents and purposes should be impassable can be simply walked through for no apparent reason. It's an issue that pops up in many areas throughout the game, though some of the biggest offenders are in the city. In terms of background music, the game is alright, but having average music isn't a defense for all the issues that I've brought up previously. Deadly Beauties is a mess of a game that requires a boatload of more work before it's completed. It needs to smooth out issues in almost every aspect, from level design to story. And while I'm sure the game could be updated in order to take care of those issues, the fact remains that in its current state, this game is a definite pass.